Hello everyone, and welcome back to Stages of Sound, or welcome to Stages of Sound if it's your first time. My name is Jack.
I'm Mackenzie, and we have a third friend today.
Yes.
Yeah. This is Shane, our good pal.
Our good friend, whom we have known for many years and who has varied video game tastes that complement our own, or fill in gaps in our knowledge.
Yep.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Shane?
I am, IT person by trade, love video games, play a lot of video games, really like Metroid Prime. Love the soundtrack.
Wait, we haven't introduced what this episode is about
Well,
yet, so
now
you
we have.
spoiled
It's Metroid Prime. Wow.
Yeah, Metroid Prime was released in 2002 for the GameCube, I believe?
November 18th.
Whoa.
Yeah, one of the landmark titles in the action game genre, I think, generally agreed on. One of the highest rated games of all time in general.
Is that so?
But we're not, no,
I don't
like
think
96
so.
on Metacritic.
God damn.
Ow,
Yeah.
actually, that's higher than I expected it to be.
No, Metroid Prime is very well regarded critically. Like, it was a darling of that era.
Well, didn't it flop in Japan, though?
Every Metroid game has flopped in Japan to a hilarious degree. Prime is one of the less floppy ones. Still didn't do great, but I think it was the third best-selling GameCube game overall, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, well, the GameCube didn't do very well, but it was like, Melee, Mario Kart, and then Metroid Prime, I believe. I could be mistaken.
Wow,
But,
that's impressive.
regardless. Actually. Yeah, and Metroid Prime is a great game, but we're not here to talk about how good the game is.
So,
we are here to talk about...
sorry. We're here to talk about the soundtrack, just, hijacking that line. But
of course.
To give you some perspective, I have never played a Metroid Prime game in my life, and all I know from it is from what I've listened to in the past 24 hours. Jack is a bit more knowledgeable.
Yeah, I mean, you've played Metroid, but just not Metroid Prime,
I played
right?
like Super Metroid and a bit of Metroid Dread, yeah.
Yeah, so you got at least some of that context.
That's slightly well-versed, yeah. I mean, I've played Prime 1, 2, and 3. I've played Metroid, Super Metroid, and Fusion before, and Dread, so I've played most of the titles.
Yeah, all you're missing, I think, is Samus Returns on the 3DS and its original version on the Game Boy, and then the very original.
I've played the rare entry of Hunters on the DS.
Oh,
Whoa.
true. I'm jealous of that. Metroid Prime Hunters. You're the only person I know that's played that game, and
that
I
game
wish I could.
Was
the only person
so
in the world
cool.
that's played.
Maybe
That's right. But that game was sold on its multiplayer, and yet Shane was the only person with a copy. It's crazy. How did you play multiplayer?
I just had 5 copies and 5 different DSs, and I just played them all simultaneously.
Perfect.
Sounds great. I've played the original, Super, a bit of Fusion, not a ton of Fusion though. I played through all of Dread, and then I've only played Prime 3 for the Wii. I didn't play Prime 1 or 2. That was just by virtue of being like 12, and that was the game that was around. So, beggars can't be choosers at that time, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We went over this in episode 0 a little bit. I have conflicted feelings about the Metroid soundtrack as a whole, but I will say I don't have conflicting feelings about the Metroid Prime soundtrack.
You think
overall,
it's better than the average Metroid soundtrack? Would you say?
Yes, I would say of the Metroid soundtracks, it is my second favorite behind Prime 3. Like the Prime series in general is a leg up above the other Metroid games. I don't think that's controversial. I think that's pretty well agreed upon.
I think that's a fairly lukewarm take to have. I mean, Prime 3 really comes into its own with a lot of its tracks. I think Prime 3 has some of the best listenable songs out of all 3, whereas 1 and 2 definitely hit more of an ambiance overall. But man, did they nail that ambience. Like, yeah. When I first booted up Prime 1 on the GameCube, it wasn't even my GameCube, it was actually my best friend's GameCube at the time. I just listened to the music and I was like, oh my goodness. I feel like I am on an alien planet ready to kick some tail.
Yeah,
well, and
before we get started, I just want to shout out, this soundtrack was composed by Kenji Yamamoto and Koichi Kyuma, I believe is how that's pronounced. Kenji Yamamoto is one of the people who's worked on many Metroid games. I believe Super is the other big one that he worked on. I don't think he did the original. And yeah, the number one thing that I wanted to say about Prime in general is every track is really working to try to sell the ambience, right? The atmosphere that they're trying to create is something that every single track in the game is going for better and sometimes for worse, in my opinion.
Yeah, sometimes the ambience can feel a little uniform, but I think they played well enough with some of like the ambiance themes. Like I'll get into this a little bit later, but like stuff with the once it starts mixing in some of the phase-on elements into it, they have like an interesting like organic synth that kind of comes into some of the background tracks.
Interesting. I might know what you're talking
really
about.
Cool. I'll point them out when they kind of come up. But
yeah. So should we start with like? Do you have a track that you wanted to highlight for that in particular, Shane? Like that sort of organic synth in particular.
It's kind of more with like the space pirates and the what is it called? I think it's the Super Space Pirate or the Phase-On Pirate at the end.
The Omega Space Pirate?
Thank you, Omega Space Pirate.
Yeah,
It's that track. There's a lot of that like sort of like biological like bubbling synth almost. I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, it's got that sort of in the title, not the title, the file select theme as well.
I was going
right?
to say that. There's like when I it's one of like the few that I was able to research. The file select, it opens with this like glitchy kind of synth. It reminded me of something like an infection or radiation or something.
Which it starts
funnily enough. For someone who has never played the games, I want to highlight infection/radiation is like exactly what Phase-On is supposed to be. So if that's the impression that you got, then they nailed that perfectly.
Yeah, it definitely starts more digital in the title theme. There is some more like the organic eeriness later on too.
So
the other one,
when you say organic, is that kind of like a rounder, like bubblier, like synthesized sound?
Definitely.
Yes, yeah,
Whereas
but it's still a synthesizer.
Yeah, the other part I'd say is more staticky.
Right.
Would be like the title theme and the menu select theme. Those two both are very like electric. Almost is how I would quantify that. I feel like I should make a disclosure. I am not a music person. I don't understand a lot of music theory. A lot of my take is just going to be the emotional or the feelings I get.
Yeah, you're
Honestly,
going off of vibes. That's fine.
That's a really important perspective, I think, when it comes to like video game music, because that's the intended audience, the player, the enthusiast.
That's a good point. And I'm like a little bit of a halfway between Mackenzie's more educated view and your more ignorant view. I've got like some context, but not a ton. So I think we've got a pretty well-rounded ensemble to break this down.
Fair. Just as a little addition here to that previous point, the other track that really kind of gets that like phase-on sound to it is the second phase of the Metroid Prime fight at the end of the game.
Do we want to jump straight to the Metroid Prime fight? Mackenzie, I don't know if you had time to listen to this one.
I don't know that one.
Okay, well, we can break it down for you, because there is a decent bit to talk about with the Metroid Prime theme, especially like the second version of it, because the first thing that stands out to me is that it is a rearrangement of the original Metroid title theme. Like, the bum, 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 that one, the very like spacey, low feeling, and this one, it arranges it to be more of like a combat track, obviously, still keeping that really, really slow tempo, but like filling it in with, like you said, Shane, lots of like those phase-on sounds and crunchy background effects, and I have a couple things to say about that, but I can let you break it down first, Shane. Give us some context, if you will.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool fight. It's a two-phase fight. The first one, you fight Metroid Prime in his Ing form, which is like sort of a four-legged centipedal monster.
Oh, wait, I thought the Ing were from Metroid Prime 2.
They are, but like the first, if you look up any photos of this, the first phase is definitely like this. He looks like an Ing.
That's interesting. Is that like a call forward, do you think? Like they're setting up Prime 2 by having this?
I don't exactly know. And I mean, again, this could just be the form that they designed for it and then based the Ing off the Metroid Prime first form.
So
if I were to guess...
what's an Ing?
Sorry, yeah, context. The Ing are part of the Dark Realm in the second game.
Yeah, they're one of the main forces. They're the dark contrasting the light in Metroid Prime 2. Like some of the main entities there. So it's interesting. They're not in Metroid Prime 1 at all, besides here, which makes me think I have another theory that instead of being an Ing, it might just be a more evolved Metroid. Because in Metroid Prime 2 and Samus Returns and all that, the Metroids do get more like grown, not centipede-esque exactly, but like certainly larger and more insectoid forms.
They become less of a
transparent
jellyfish, with claws that suck your life out.
So if I were to guess, it could be a call forward, but I might just guess it's a more evolved Metroid. Metroid, as the name would imply.
And I mean, and then in the second phase, it loses this outer casing and becomes like the full Metroid Prime, which is like basically a more advanced Metroid that has engaged in phase-on, and you have to use like phase-on pools on the ground to kind of kill it, and it like supercharges Samus and all that fun stuff. So
right.
So the first phase is definitely more, I would say it's more electrical. There's less of the phase-on in there, but once it moves into the second phase, that phase-on really kicks up to like 11, and they really like show that this is like a being that is using phase-on.
What's interesting is that the Metroid theme, like the original Metroid title theme, only kicks in on the second phase once it's really started like consuming the phase-on. I wonder, it could just be as generic as like this is to show that the Metroid, as the title theme was about, is empowered and sort of is now more threatening. But you'd think that they would go like the Metroid theme would play at the start and then not at the end, but who knows? We're all just interpreting the music.
Yeah.
And speaking of bringing back earlier themes, I want to talk about...
Wait, I'm not done with Metroid Prime.
Okay, sorry.
I'm sorry. I'll let you get to it right after, but I did want to say, if we're moving away from the Metroid Prime fight right now, like I said, it uses the intro melody of Metroid 1, and in particular Super Metroid, but what I want to bring up is, you guys know that track, right? Like the spacey, ethereal intro theme.
Yeah.
Yep.
But what people forget about is that theme actually has a second part to it, where it goes more heroic and like builds up, and then it goes into like a 6/8 variant of that heroic section.
Really?
And this theme, it's actually really, really nice. I love the intro theme to Metroid, and the sad thing is that that's only on the NES version, and it might be in Samus Returns, not 100% about that, but when they brought it back for Super Metroid, all they have are the spacey alien notes, which does fit that game's title screen, but I feel like...
Does Super Metroid not get triumphant? I could have sworn
No,
it does.
not the intro theme.
Maybe not.
That one, I made sure to review this before we came onto this podcast. It's just the alien sparse notes, and that feels like such a... It's okay for Super, because that's the tone they're trying to set. Like, the intro screen to Metroid, or to Super Metroid rather, is the destroyed laboratory, and the Metroid is there. So they want to set that more down tone. But I feel like in this fight in particular, if they're harkening back to the original Metroid theme, which is an okay thing to do with final bosses, I've sort of talked about that before, then they really could have gone all out with incorporating that heroic motif as well, and like having a second section to this song to really bring that full circle, because as it is, it's just those spacey notes that it's harkening back to. I would have really liked to see that full theme developed.
Would bringing a triumphant theme like that into the boss fight, given that I don't know anything about it, would that mess with any of the vibe at all?
What do you think, Shane?
I don't think it would mess with the vibe, but actually, I have a side point to this. Jack, did you listen to the staff credit track?
Well, isn't that just the intro theme or the file select theme again?
It's not. It's actually modified. It's slightly different. It is very, very similar, but it may have some of those like more heroic notes I found. It's definitely more of a feel good song as it closes out and rolls those credits. But it is different, at least from my recollection.
I can't hear that just skimming through it really quickly, but I'll take your word for it. I don't think it does have the like specific notes that it goes through in the original Metroid title theme, but I do still respect it for like having that heroic theme at the end, because like Samus as a whole, I've always thought of her as like a mix between Isaac Clarke and Doomguy, right? Like she's not the one they all fear, but she's not a horror game protagonist, right? She's sort of caught in the middle.
She is a bounty hunter by trade, right? Like she is contracted by, like especially in the third game, she is contracted by the military to hunt down the other hunters. Mm-hmm.
So she's not like a legendary... Well, she is legendary, but she's not like a prophesized destroyer of worlds.
No, definitely
but she's like a proficient, professional, heroic soldier. And like that's why I'm a little sad when these themes don't take that heroic part of the original Metroid, because I felt that it was really emblematic of Samus. So that's just sort of where I'm coming from it. Still, the Metroid Prime theme is still great. Like the fight against the Metroid Prime. Still really love the track. I'm just a little sad about this particular missed opportunity.
Very fair. Yeah.
Sorry, Mackenzie. What did you want to say? I'm sorry.
Well, it was a very kind of cursory thing, but one of the tracks that I listened to was Tallon Overworld main theme. I don't know when this plays or in what context.
It's right after like the intro segment, right? Where like because you start on the frigate Orpheon, and eventually that crashes onto the planet of Tallon 4, and like as you step out onto Tallon 4 proper, the intro of the game is basically done, and now you're into the game proper.
So
and this is where this
what I
plays.
noticed from it, right, is that it also remixes an older Metroid theme. I don't know if it's the main one.
Remixing isn't exactly the right term, but it is using the exact same chords for sure.
That's what I mean.
Intentionally evoking,
Well, how is that not a remix?
Well, because like the melody itself is totally different. But
I would argue that you
sort of
don't
fine.
need the melody, because the point is it references that. You can easily tell that that's, even I who don't know the Metroid music, I could immediately tell that that's what it was trying to evoke.
Yeah, especially the starting chords when the melody hasn't come in at all. It's 1-to-1.
And in fact, I think it's really cool that they were able to do that without much of the melody there, and just kind of that like one flat 7-1, which is, to me, it's characteristic to either Metroid or Pokemon. And since I knew I was listening to Metroid,
I had that exact thought that like Tallon 4 Overworld felt like I believe it's the Brinstar theme from Metroid 1 that they're invoking here. It felt like that, and then they combined it with like the title theme to Pokemon Red. You know what I mean? Like
I know what you mean.
mashup
It's because
between
it's the same harmonic motion. It makes sense.
and they're playing it for all like the heroic triumph they can here as Samus has sort of descended onto this
But
planet.
at the same time, it doesn't
right?
it doesn't sound super triumphant to me, just on like a cursory listen. But maybe just by calling back to that theme.
Compared to what came before, for sure, at least. Like in the soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, you literally, when you're crashing this ship, you literally just finished dealing with. Do you start by fighting a pirate on the frigate? Is that
Isn't
what it is?
The Parasite Queen that you take down?
Yes, you get the Parasite Queen out of there. Really cool, really nice song. Honestly,
Parasite Queen? Do we want to go into it, or are you talking about
I do want to get into Parasite Queen eventually, but Tallon 4 first.
Parasite. Let's kind of go. I would say best to go through this in order. That way we don't miss anything, because there are a lot of tracks, especially like level tracks, that I want to talk about later on. So before we move away from Frigate Orpheon, let's talk about Parasite Queen here. Like, as far as like it's a very cool fight. It's the first boss you fight in the game, and it's like you come up to this like basically this tank, and the Parasite Queen is inside this USG Federation ship basically, and when the music kicks in, you know that this thing is here to mess up your day. It is threatening, and like I would think this track just screams anxiety.
The really lurching sort of synths that play like the screeching like that really lends to that feeling for sure.
I think it's great to know that it was the track plays the settings of a ship, basically, right, like a spacecraft. So last episode, Jack and I talked about this idea of factory music or industrial music, where you use industrial like metal sounds to like evoke this kind of feeling that you're in a factory or some industrial place. I think just by listening to Parasite Queen, that was the first thing that jumped out to me, that everything's very metallic.
I'll say,
but also that
like a lot of the soundtrack.
But this one,
much of it uses that.
From the ones that I listened to, though, this one was the most that like super jumped out at me. And then there's also, of course, just like the sci-fi kind of like synth sounds that kind of transforms this like what could just be a factory fight theme into something more futuristic. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, like more alien, which is what it's supposed to be, because you're fighting this like mutated monstrosity, and it's like a very quintessential Metroid fight. How it's just stuck in this giant tank, but you're sort of trying to maneuver to shoot through the tank to take it down. Yeah.
The thing I love the most about it is definitely like it's like a really heavy like hammering bass line, and like this really whiny high pitched synth on top.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
that duality is really cool.
Yeah, and it works like, how do I put it? You would expect like a boss this big and menacing to have like some, big loud bass, and it has that in spades, but it still has that like whiny synth overtone for sure to really get that feeling across of, I don't know, isolation and alienness. It's great.
Yeah. So you beat Flaagra, or not Flaagra, Parasite Queen, and then spaceship crashes down to the planet. You make your escape back down. There's an escape sequence, obviously, which is a fairly panic-inducing track, as all of the
escape sequence in a Metroid game. That's crazy.
I know. What are they doing?
There's got to be one in every
actually,
game.
While we're here, I do want to just shout out Metroid Prime for being like, you can really tell that they are trying to emulate like Metroid in a 3D space, because when
shout out to
this
Retro
game,
Studios.
Yeah, they did a great job. It's not even Nintendo, the company that made the original Metroid, that's doing this, but like when the game was coming out, there was a lot of hubbub about how they're trying to take Metroid and make it 3D. It's just not gonna work. Like, they're trying to turn it into a generic shooter. It's gonna lose the soul of Metroid, right? And if there's anything we can say about Metroid Prime, and this includes the soundtrack, is that it is very Metroid. Like, there's no discussion about it.
What I want to know,
it's as honorable and as justified as a Metroid game as the 2D Metroidvania games are.
What I want to know, what game came right before Metroid Prime 1?
Super Metroid.
Was it? So there wasn't a game between
years.
those. Wow, that's impressive, actually.
Yeah, so like, people were like, it was already kind of a legacy series when they were developing Prime. So like, people wanted that cherished game in Super Metroid to not be let down, and Prime did a great job for that, I think.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah, they knocked it out of the park. Especially like dispelling everybody's worries like that is super impressive.
I guess that explains the Metroid or the Super Metroid like kind of references that I've heard scattered around, or more blatant sometimes. But
the Super Metroid references.
Yeah, well, like Magmoor Caverns, etc.
Oh, well, that one is pretty blatant. Yeah, that's fair. Yep, we'll get to that later. We should stick in order. I agree,
Sure,
Shane.
yeah.
So you crash the ship, escape sequence.
Escape sequence happens. You fly down to Tallon Overworld, and then
Got those heroic melodies playing. Very cool.
Yep, you land, and then honestly, there's just a whole lot of ambience until you get to Flaagra.
A couple of standouts are like Chozo Ruins. There's a lot of ambient tracks that don't do a ton of crazy stuff, but they all still are really going for that atmospheric, lonely feel as you're exploring this unknown planet. That's what I get from the OST.
Yeah, there's nothing here but aliens, and Chozo ruins. Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but I believe you go to the Chozo ruins, you figure out, like, your main objective of
I'm not the person to ask here.
Okay.
I'm going off of the soundtrack and what I could piece together from that. You are the one that's played the game.
Fair enough. Yeah, I believe, I could have this slightly out of order, but yeah, you go to the Chozo ruins fairly early, and it gives you, like, a basic rundown. It's like, hey, okay, you gotta go around the planet, collect all these Chozo artifacts, and then we can unlock the place where the Metroid Prime is and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah,
So-
it's sort of like how in Super Metroid, how the ending is locked behind like the statues of the bosses, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, very, very, very similar kind of style. So, yeah, you leave the Chozo ruins, and then you start navigating like Upper Tallon Overworld, and then you eventually run into.
Well, before we go too far, I do want to shout out the Chozo Ruins track, because I think, like, in terms of those early atmospheric tracks, it really nails that feeling that it's going for, of like alien aloneness, classic Metroid, pretty much, right? The alien aspect of Metroid, those opening, sparse notes instead of the heroic, triumphant notes like you saw in Tallon 4 Overworld.
You actually reminded me of a secondary theme that comes up in a lot of the music, especially with the Chozo stuff, is this almost like hymn, like this elderly ancient being.
Yeah, the MIDI choir especially is really going for that theme. Like, Mackenzie, we talked about how we really have some nostalgia for those MIDI sounds and how choirs aren't always the easiest thing to nail down.
Yeah, choirs are notoriously...
Clearly this choir is not a real choir, but I still think they use the sound style and the color that it brings to great effect.
For sure. That is one that jumped out at me when I was listening through to the tracks. I feel like the instrumentation in a lot of the tracks kind of threw me for a loop, because it wasn't what I was expecting from a sci-fi space game. So there's the choir, which is fitting at times. It can be spacey, but it's like pretty prominent.
It's especially good for like space ruins, which Metroid is a lot of, like the Chozo ancient civilization stuff.
I love how it portrays the Chozo as like ancient, but also they were geniuses. They were hyper intelligent.
Right.
They had the
solutions,
but now they're gone.
They're not that ancient, because like Samus was raised by them. They are recently gone. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the sort of vibe I kind of get from the soundtrack. Is like,
but they've been around for a long time.
They have been. They're ancient and wise, and they could have been your allies, and now they're gone. You know what I mean?
But alongside the choir, though, I also noticed like surprising amount of piano and harp. And that
yes, the harp especially, I noticed.
Yeah, I just, when I thought like sci-fi Metroid game, my brain did not think piano, but it's just it's just
like part of that.
But it works really well, I feel.
Yeah,
it does. Yeah,
it's sort of like we were talking about in Mario Galaxy. Is like they're going for the serenity of space in these, even though you don't like see space. It's still like the serenity of alien vistas. You know what I mean? And part of that is also like the majesty of ruins from the civilization that's long past. I also kind of want to shout out in Chozo Ruins in particular. There's like an almost gasping effect at times that is played in the instrumentation, which Shane, it reminded me of Ender Lilies, how in that final track there's like that gasp that really like it lands the atmosphere really well, even if it's very creepy, and this does something very similar.
Yes, yeah, very much so. If you stand around in the Chozo Ruins for too long, you're kind of like, ugh.
it's beautiful, but really unsettling in its own way. Yeah,
it's goosebumps is what it is.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. So, anyways, after you do Chozo Ruins, you move forward. Actually, you do have a small mini boss that's like the it's like a what is it called? Sorry, I'm blanking.
Whatever it is, it did not stand out to me. I'm afraid.
Basically, there's a bunch of bugs in a bug nest, and you have
the hive mecha, is that it?
Yeah.
That's what I see on the soundtrack. Did not stand out, I'm afraid.
No,
sorry.
That boss and that music could just be kind of ignored. It's pretty generic.
It might be someone's favorite. Be careful.
Yeah, fair enough.
You never diss anything ever.
Ever.
Never ever. Never say
anyway,
anything
Metroid music sucks.
Boo. Bad take. Anyways, you eventually make your way to Flaagra, which is the first big boss on Tallon, and Flaagra is a really cool song. Musically.
Oh, really?
Like, it takes a couple listens, and you really have to like stop and think about what you're listening to, because like when you first get into that boss fight, and like the music spins up, and it's like, oh, this is not intense. This is not really that exciting. What is going on with this boss song?
It's sort of like almost plodding, like methodical in its rhythm. It doesn't feel like intense like a boss song.
No, not at all. But it has some really cool instrumentation. And it's just weird.
Yeah, the really high synths stand out for sure. It feels very Metroid. Again, like, they're really nailing the feel, because in Metroid, a lot of the bosses aren't, like, necessarily huge, fast threats. They're sort of weird, slow creatures that are almost indescribable. So, this is really good for one of those fights, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think it's really interesting. I think it's a cool song, worth mentioning, but, it is missable, I think, in a lot of ways, unfortunately.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
People just pass it by and they don't bother to go back and actually listen to that track. So,
yeah, the very like deliberate rhythm, I think, is very interesting for a boss theme.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, after you have fight with Flaagra, I believe you eventually migrate your way down into. I can't remember if it's
because they're like birds, and she's kind of like a bird. Anyway,
yeah. Sorry. I think it's Magmoor Caverns next.
We got stuff to say about Magmoor Caverns.
I've got a couple things to say. I don't know.
I'm not gonna lie. I think Magmoor Caverns might be my favorite song on the soundtrack, and that's cheating because it's not even from this game.
Well,
it's a callback song.
I say there's nothing wrong with liking a remix or a remake or a remaster.
Yeah,
whatever you want to
I
call
think
it.
this is a remix of Lower Norfair from Super Metroid, and I think it does a great job. Both of the areas are like lava areas, and this song is like a quintessential lava song. What's not to love?
I'm gonna hit it with that little critique that I always give to lava places and say that it just uses the kind of dominant Phrygian scale that you hear in every desert or volcano level.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is fine, and like I understand why it's used, but it's based on this like cinematic trope from the 1920s where they use like this Western caricature of Middle Eastern places. So you know,
in order to invoke danger,
yeah, it's like, oh, it's this exotic deserty place, but that aside, it's done really well and it's constructed really well, and I think it's a great remaster of Lower Norfair for sure.
I love it for it, honestly. I think to say, I might not say it's literally my favorite track in the game, but it's definitely up there. Like, and part of that, it sort of leads me into one of the main points I had about the Metroid Prime soundtrack as a whole. I think Metroid, and especially Metroid Prime, is allergic to melody. I think that if they construct like a full coherent melody, they might just break into hives and die of anaphylactic shock.
Interesting that you said that when talking about Magmoor Caverns, which had a very solid melody.
It's the only one. The only one. It's the one. Maybe with the exception of the title screen, or not the title screen rather, but the file select theme. That is like the only other very strong melody in the whole soundtrack. So, this is especially jarring after we're coming off of Shovel Knight, which is like some of the most masterful melodic construction that we've ever seen.
But that shines a bit of a light into why that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because Shovel Knight and Metroid Prime are very different. They're trying to achieve different things.
Yes,
so
I agree.
Like, melody might not be what Metroid needs. I don't think it is.
Right. That's why I'm not saying that it's necessarily like a damning criticism, or even necessarily criticism. I just wanted to point it out. I think that if they touch Metroid with anything shorter than a 10-foot pole, they'll just die. The whole
You said Metroid, but I feel I get it.
Melody. If Metroid touches...
if they touch Metroid Prime 4...
The metaphor is falling apart, I'm sorry. Well, I think if they touch Metroid Prime 4, they might just die, and that explains why it's taking so long. Anyway.
It can't happen soon enough. I need it so bad.
We'll probably make an episode on that when it comes out, if the soundtrack is good.
Yeah, I will be playing that and buying it on release. No questions asked.
We will make sure to invite you as well, Shane, even if we both play it.
Appreciate it.
So Magmoor Caverns really sticks out because in such a melody-sparse game, this volcano level of all places is where it gets like the really, really strong driving melody. And I especially like the very constant percussion that's going in this song as well.
That staple drum beat. What I want to know is there anything about Magmoor Caverns that might make it a little bit more busy, visually or setting-wise? Like, is it a place that has more going on?
Just from what I've seen of it,
complex
I can see the like, just by the virtue of it being about fire and lava in general, sort of evokes that feeling, right? But Shane, is there anything else like in particular?
I like Magmoor Caverns. It is basically a giant underground subterranean cavern full of lava, but there's also a lot of like tech. There's a lot like there are like geothermal generators pumping lava through the planet to generate power.
Oh, so
there are enemies, there are space pirates, obviously. We'll get more into space pirates later, trust me.
Well, I can see this being like the interpretation of it being busy, being correlated to like the fact that it's, geothermal plants like work, that energy is constantly being produced from this place.
Yes.
In that sense, a melody and a driving one like this certainly does make sense.
Yeah, I would say Magmoor Caverns fits thematically with the rest of that area very, very well.
Yeah. Does it like stand out a little bit among the soundtrack when you're playing it in terms of being
absolutely.
such more melodically out there?
You get a groove going into Magmoor Caverns. like you are like slowly moving your head in rhythm with the percussion as you're playing through.
Yeah, because the percussion is just always going the entire track. It never lets up.
On the topic of groove, I want a special shout out to the bass in this one that wasn't there in Super Metroid.
Yeah.
Holy crap! It kind of pops off.
Absolutely
it's super good.
True. Yep. Magmoor Caverns, I heard it before I heard Lower Norfair, actually. Like, just the way that I explored video game soundtracks that came out before my time. And, like, I do still really, really appreciate Lower Norfair, but Magmoor Caverns has the sauce. Yeah! Microphone fell down!
Oh, my God.
Jesus. Magmoor Caverns absolutely has the sauce when it comes to the soundtrack as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mackenzie, we're moving past the microphone fall. We're leaving it in. I've adjusted it. It's fine.
Okay.
Magmoor Caverns is great. We love Magmoor Caverns. Every one of us, right? Just universally agreed upon?
Check.
Pretty much.
It's fine. I'm telling you, it's fine.
It's canon.
It's gonna stand up this time. Mackenzie, this is your fault. It's your microphone.
What?
Anyway.
I gave you a microphone.
Let me just be ungrateful for 1 second, okay?
Oh my God. Okay.
Anyway.
I honestly, I can't remember if there are any like quintessential bosses in Magmoor Cavern that like need mentioning. I don't really have anything written down for it. So I think we can just move on into probably my favorite area in the entire game because I love the Phendrana Drifts.
It's got favorite area in the game vibes just from the OST alone. You know what I mean?
That's one that I knew coming into this.
I love the theme of it's first of all, it is an ice theme. It does hit some of the like quintessential ice theme melodies
tropes
and sound and tropes and stuff like that. But it's also, it's not dangerous. It's peaceful. It's ethereal. It's calm. and it's just magical. I love Phendrana Drifts as a song.
Yeah, I will say, like, in terms of Metroid being allergic to melody, Phendrana Drifts is the pinnacle of how you can, take that constraint, quote unquote. It's a self-imposed constraint, whatever. It's how you can take that limiter and like use it to your benefit. That song doesn't need a melody to have such a beautiful atmosphere,
I feel like if you put a melody in an ice level, it runs the risk of being Christmassy.
Oh, no, don't you go there. I mean, you're not wrong, but I'm going to come up with a counterexample right now. You guys talk. I'm going to think of it.
Well, okay, so important to note, coming into this...
nope, 3D World is Christmas.
Okay. I didn't know...
Mario Galaxy is Christmas. Damn it.
Jack, I'm going to kick you out of the Discord call.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So... going into this, I didn't know what kind of level this was. Like, I didn't know what it was playing for, but in my notes, immediately I was like, lol, is this a snow level? Like, it definitely immediately, portrayed that. And it got me thinking a little bit, because sci-fi games, I feel, have a difficult task when it comes to kind of portraying that. Because if they go too traditional with it, like adding, like, sleigh bells or melodies, it runs
takes you out
the
of the
risk of being
atmosphere.
Christmassy. It takes you out of the atmosphere, for sure. But if they go too far in the ambient direction, then it could just be any old, like, space level, right?
Yeah,
like, it's hard to distinguish what makes it.
It has to be cold, and it has to be space. And
but space is already kind of cold is the problem.
But if it's not snow cold space, it's not the right mood. It's a very like thin piece of the triangle you have to get to nail to get the right aesthetic. And I think honestly, I think they nailed it perfectly.
Yeah,
because
this would be the poster child.
It is spacey enough to still be cold, and you just still recognize it as a snow level.
Yeah, well, what I was gonna say, like on my notes, I say it does a great job straddling that line, and one, it uses a bunch of like high-pitched synths that really evokes that. There's like a windy kind of sound or effect, but also it uses harp and piano in like really key moments.
Oh, and those aren't traditionally like either space or snow.
Exactly, those aren't. Well, they are snowy sometimes, but not necessarily Christmassy. Piano for sure, high piano.
Right, true. Yeah.
But you wouldn't hear those in something that was like a generic like you're on a moon or something,
Yeah. And
I think
that also it ties in. It's part of that is probably that harp and high piano are used a lot in the soundtrack, but I think that's just fine. It's the color of the soundtrack that they're interpreting for like a colder feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely get goosebumps every time I listen to this song.
And this isn't exactly chronological order, but I also want to shout out Phendrana Drifts Depths here, because it's the same song, except they just add this groove and bass line to it.
Don't know that
if you didn't segue into that, I was going to segue into that, because it's like you have Phendrana Drifts, and then you just take like the bass piece of Phendrana Drifts, and you just add like this jammin' funky like
it's a step away from being out of place. It's very close, but I think it stays just within that vibe. So it's almost like the contrast is kind of funny, but I can totally see you, like, you're stone-faced, you're very calm, relaxed, listening to Phendrana Drifts, and then you go down to the depths, and without your facial expression changing, you're just like bobbing your head along to it now. You know what I mean? It's still serene, but
the
also
funny
it's
thing
jam.
is, this song they did a whole track for 2 rooms.
Is it only in 2 rooms?
It's 2 rooms. It's basically a main entrance room into like this frozen water, like subwater area. This is where you get space jump in the game, actually, or the gravity suit. Sorry, and you jump into this like water, like ice lake basically, and then you're just plodding around down there, and you're just like jamming out with this huge funky bass line, and you're just like, hell yeah.
And I imagine you've like heard Phendrana Drifts a lot at this point, so like you just jump down there and all of a sudden you're grooving, and you don't know why.
You don't even go into Phendrana Drifts into the depths immediately. You actually come back to Phendrana Drifts after getting the plasma beam upgraded to your gun. And then you go to depths to pick up the gravity suit, because you need it for later. Because you need it for down to Frigate Orpheon.
Gotcha.
But,
so you just get like a nice little groove interlude. Hey, I'll take it.
It's amazing. Mackenzie, I want to know your take on this song.
Sorry, I zoned out. Which one was that?
That's Phendrana Drifts Depths.
I didn't hear it. I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, like, honestly, just go to YouTube right now, type in Phendrana Drifts Depths, and pull it up, because it's just Phendrana Drifts again, except there's a groove and bass line.
So
like
I'm
bass
not
synth.
going to do that because my computer's recording.
Okay.
I'll listen to it later. When I
Listen to it later. Yeah, definitely
Okay.
don't miss out on that one.
Yeah.
I love me a good bass groove though. So
It's sort of just slapped on, but it works surprisingly well. So especially for a song like Phendrana Drifts to just slap on a groove
that
like
is
that.
that is not what I expected. To be fair,
You know what I would compare it to is how North area in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is like a very
Montenevera?
traditional, and then in Montenevera,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay,
It's taking that bass sort of mysterious theme and then just like turn it into a groove.
but that's
It's great.
interesting because you don't like North area.
I don't like
but
North
you do
area.
like
I do
Phendrana.
like Montenevera, and I do like, in Phendrana I like both versions. So yeah.
Okay, so you think that the depths like it works?
It works.
Okay.
Just barely.
I'd say, yeah, Montenevera is more of an upgrade than this is.
Okay.
This is a side note that's just jamming for no good reason.
Yep.
That's always fun. I like that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it.
You gotta have
It's
a
just
bit of a
Kenji
groove
Yamamoto
sometimes.
just having a time.
Exactly. Yep. What do we need to do to this mysterious, pristine song? I don't know. Bass. All right, here we go. Yep. And then they did. Okay, we should
Sorry.
move on. Phendrana
Yeah.
Drifts is great. Phendrana Drifts Depths also great. We got to move on.
Yeah, I'm gonna try. By this point, we've been playing the game for probably 6-7 hours, probably at this point.
And it's only like a 15-ish hour game, right?
Yeah, it's actually not that long. It depends how much you're scanning. It depends how much you're going around.
Of course.
And getting lost.
I mean, Prime 3 took me like 40 hours, and that's like twice as long as that game's supposed to take. I just took my time.
I think at this point we need to mention the Space Pirates theme, because that is like the quintessential song. Because like for those who don't know, Space Pirates, they are basically
The grunts.
the grunts, but also like the prime nemesis of Samus. Like they're like
That's true.
They're the opposing organization that are always reappearing and getting in Samus's way.
Ridley is their leader, so that should tell you something.
Ridley is a super space pirate basically. That
I think he is the leader. I'm pretty sure.
he is
fully didn't know that.
a leader, but not. I don't know if there is a quintessential.
Right, they're
head,
a little
but-
disorganized.
Yeah, exactly. They're pirates after all. But he is one of the heads, and he is always trying to kill Samus.
Oh, you didn't know that the Space Pirates were Samus's rivals, Mackenzie?
No, I didn't know that Ridley was part of them. I thought he was
Oh,
a different guy.
yeah.
Yeah, Ridley is just a heavily modified space pirate.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, there you go. Now you know.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah. The more you know. I'll get into Meta Ridley.
We will have stuff to say
later.
about Meta Ridley for sure.
Yeah,
Mackenzie,
yeah,
you might know that track even.
I think so. It
Oh,
plays in
yeah.
Smash, I'm sure, right?
It does play in Smash.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll
We'll get into
Yes,
that later.
okay.
Yeah,
It's the one in 5-4, which is cool.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, space pirate theme. Is in terms of like, you walk into a room and you hear like this like very quiet like high pitched synth like and like some like in the background. you know that that this room has space pirates in it, and then it just kicks right into this like full on action.
Yep.
Yeah, and yeah, in terms of it just being iconic, I don't know if it's a song that I'd listen to, but it is space pirates.
It's so close
Right.
to having a melody. It's so
Well,
close to
I mean,
having a melody.
when it comes to video game music, like I feel like listenability sometimes has to be an afterthought because
yeah, it's secondary.
the focus has to be how it fits with the setting.
What I will say about the Space Pirate theme is that I think I do prefer the version that they use in Prime 3, which is a little heavier, a little more pronounced. This one, like the main chords melody, heavy quotation marks, is like a little more in the background, and like the synths and effects are more on display. In Prime 3, they really go harder with it, which I personally prefer. I think
In 2 as well, they've kind of remixed it 3 times now, and the third iteration is definitely the best iteration. It definitely has its own melody, finger quotes. It's definitely evolved, for sure.
Which
So,
I respect.
best.
I think keeping this theme like associated with the Space Pirates is fine. It makes sense.
I'm-
They are like the traditional enemy group.
Remind me if I'm mixing it up. Is this the one that has like an almost melody and what sounds like almost a distorted guitar kind of thing?
kind of.
Sort of.
You'll know Space Pirates because it kind of climbs. It goes.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I love that kind of like synth motion. That's super cool.
Yeah, I really do like the synths they use in this song. It's and kind of this whole soundtrack, like it varies from like the warbling high stuff into the super low like rumbly stuff. I'm a fan.
Actually, those synth kind of siren-y sounds that you were kind of mimicking there. They use I think they actually use like parallel fifths or fourths.
Yep, I would believe that.
To kind of get like this it works in many different ways and you can use it for different things, but to me it feels like disorienting in this sense, especially with like the drums happening. Like
here you get the sense of like a surprise ambush sort of feeling from it. Yep.
Yeah, it's good. And I mean, you get more of these themes as well in the Omega Pirate fight as well, but you do get a little more of that Phazon organics that I talked about earlier in the episode.
Right.
But very similar tracks still, I would say.
The Omega Pirate as well, you mean?
Yeah, the Omega Pirate it has bits of Space Pirate in it, but there's also still some new stuff in it as well.
Yeah, I like the heavier like clanging percussion, like we were talking about, sort of those factory sounds. This is for Omega Pirate now, and like it really slows down and takes itself, more seriously. I'd say it's less frantic and disorienting and more raw, intimidating. Right? I don't know if I could outline exactly like the modes it uses to
you guys
get
haven't
this
seen,
effect, but.
You guys haven't seen the actual Omega Pirate fight. Basically, for context, the Omega Pirate is just one big Phazon. He basically has like a big Phazon tank strapped to his back, and he can turn invisible. And he's like this giant. He's huge, and you need X-ray visor at the point in the game to fight him and deal with him.
Right.
But very interesting fight, but over very quickly and not.
So you don't really get the time to hear this theme to its full effect.
I mean, I think that fight, if you do it quickly or quickly-ish, it's over in about a minute and a half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So it's not anything crazy, unfortunately.
Still, I do like the industrial sounds.
I still like the song, but I don't know if it's quite worth a full mention.
Sure, fair enough. I like what they did with it. It's not bad. Enough. Okay, so where are we in the timeline now? We're like 10 hours in.
Yeah, Space Pirates and Omega Pirate. We kind of skipped over. We kind of jumped over the downed Frigate Orpheon section, but we need to talk about the downed Frigate Orpheon. There is a artifact in the Tallon Overworld that's basically gets crushed by the Frigate Orpheon when it crashes into the planet.
Yeah, because remember, Mackenzie, this is the same ship that you started on for the intro.
Yeah, so you got to go back, and it is basically crash landed into a body of water, and it is the most peaceful. Like, I can sleep to this song in minutes. It is so chill. I don't know why they decided to make it like, they could have made it like anxious, or they could have made it like prettier, but like they just went with like this really serene, very beautiful instrumentation and melody into like this crashed, abandoned ship that will just be consumed by nature very, very quickly.
This is the one that like it stuck out to me, and it kind of made me realize like, piano's like a staple of the soundtrack. It's kind of everywhere, and it definitely works to achieve that kind of calm feeling. I wonder if that's maybe even the reason that they go for that kind of calm feeling, is because it's this ship that was the site of these like battles and this like action, and it was all very tense before, now it's just going back to nature, right? Like it's crashed, it's abandoned, like the tensions in the past, and now it's like calming down
it's just
a little bit. I don't know.
And then you get like a glimpse of the beauty of the world that it crashed into.
Yeah,
it's sort of like how Tallon Overworld does it.
I think that's nice. I don't know. It's totally speculation on my part, though.
I like the interpretation, if anything.
I would agree with that. I think that's a valid interpretation, because I mean, you do already see like the fish and like the other things integrating into the just abandoned ship that's been crashed into this body of water. Like the aquatic stuff is like taking over immediately.
Yeah, you could like very easily make that like super anxious, but it's cool that they didn't.
Yeah, and they made it like really peaceful. I'd like to contrast it with Phendrana Drifts, because Phendrana Drifts is also very peaceful, but in like sort of like a like, hey, it's nice looking, but you still got to get a move on. You could die here, Whereas this is like fully embracing, like you just want to sit down and take it all in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I would almost go a step further and say that Phendrana is, you don't want to die here. It is still dangerous, but the Down Frigate Orpheon is like, it's okay to die here.
Whoa.
And it's like,
That's
Oh
hey.
my.
I mean, yeah, the music
I
is sort
mean-
of like lulling you into that feeling. I can see it, I guess.
yeah. It's like you could drown here. You aren't in any real danger per
Yeah,
se.
there's no need
but,
to
like,
fight for your life.
You
It's all
could
peaceful.
you could take a nap in the bottom of the water there and just be okay.
Yeah, let your
Whoa.
life, what do you call it, life support just fade out over time as
Whoa.
you
Yeah.
relax. Let's
a-
getting a little dark for us.
a little
but
morbid,
I see
yeah.
the vibe you're going for, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, love Down Frigate Orpheon. They did not need to go that chill with it, but I love that they did because I think it works.
Yeah,
it
well,
works
knowing
really
the context,
really
that's
like-
super cool.
Yeah, it stands out amongst the other songs in the soundtrack. There's nothing like it on here. Again, with maybe the exception of Tallon 4, but even that's more like heroic and it's got driving undertones.
Yeah.
So it's noteworthy, if nothing else, and it is many other things.
Yeah. just a future segue while it's on my mind here. In Prime 3, if you guys ever do an episode for Prime 3, the abandoned frigate in space. In
The
Prime
GFS Valhalla?
Yeah, that's just infested with Metroids. I was like 13 when that game came out or something like that. That ship scared me. I did not like being that. It was horrifying.
Well, part of that is because the Metroids in general in that game are just the worst, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, you realize why the series is named after them in that game.
Yep. Especially in the
in the Space
Skytown
Pirate
Elysia.
Lab.
No,
Oh, right. Oh.
you have to this is just again, I'll get away from this really quick, but there's a section in Prime 3 where you have to pull a power cell and like you spend like 5 minutes walking through a research
lab
of
studying
Metroid.
Metroids.
It's packed full of Metroids. There are tens of hundreds of them, and you have to pull a power cell to get out of there, and you unleash all of them at the same time, and it is
Yeah, like
the most stressful thing in gaming.
because you realize when I need this power source, and the second I pull it, they're all going free. It's the
Yup.
worst.
I hate it, but it's such a good device. Anyways, it's just interesting.
It's
to
a very
contrast.
interesting contrast, yeah, compared to how peaceful the crashed ship is here
Yeah.
instead of the dilapidated ship in that game, which is like the most stressful thing in any Metroid game. So yeah,
Yup. Anyways, moving on. There's not a lot of game after Space Pirates.
it's a lot of like
and-
backtracking, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
at
You
this
go back
point.
through Magmoor. You go back into Phendrana Drifts Depths. And then you
Phendrana Drifts. Oh no, Samus got that Phendrana Drip.
I do wonder, when you backtrack, does the music change at all, or is it just kind of all the same stuff?
No,
Okay.
same
With the exception of
tracks.
stuff, don't the depths kick in here? Like the various depths orchestrations? Like we talked about Phendrana Drift's depths, and you only get that when you go back for the power suit, right? Or the
Right,
gravity
but
suit.
you can't even get to that room until after you have plasma beam. So usually it's not like it's different. It's just you haven't been there before.
Okay, yeah, but still it kicks in that extra instrumentation. And then there's stuff like Tallon 4 depths, which I wanted to point out because most of the depths themes are, slight variations on their original theme. Like Phendrana Drifts, it has just that funky bass. and that's it.
Are they different relayerings of the same track, or are they just total?
No, mostly they
remixes
are just
using similar
relayerings.
material? Really?
It's vertical layering, yeah.
I would say Tallon Depths though is quite a bit different.
Yes,
from
that's the one I wanted to shout out. Tallon 4 Depths is a very different track because the original is like very heroic and slow and like you're taking in all the nature, and Tallon 4 Depths is funky. It's got a great atmosphere. It's like pumping you up. I'm a
don't
big
think I
fan of
know
Tallon
that
4
one,
Depths.
but that sounds interesting.
I think you hear that track on your way back to the Chozo ruins after collecting all of the artifacts.
It makes sense that it gets you excited then. You're like on your way for the final battle, right?
You're on the way to the battle with Meta Ridley, which this makes a good segue into that song
To
because
Meta Ridley, yeah.
oh my goodness, Meta Ridley. This
Uses
song,
the James Bond clave, the ba 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 ba.
yeah, I love this.
There are
song.
only so
It
many
is-
ways to do 5/4.
It is just a jam. I can listen to this song, and this song gets me hyped.
What I'll say about it in particular that I really want to give it praise for is that it is a remix of the Ridley theme from Super Metroid, right?
Yes,
Um,
yes.
it's just pulled straight from that and put into the style of Metroid Prime. And what I'll say about that is it is a perfect fit. Like Magmoor Caverns almost has like I said, it stands out in the soundtrack because it's so melodic, contrasting with everything around it. And I do like it for that, but it is a sort of jarring. Meta Ridley just fits perfectly in this style. Like the instrumentation, the atmosphere it's going for, it all works for Metroid Prime.
Yeah, I especially like I like the dun dun burn 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 burn.
No, of course.
But then I also like the dun dun
I promise it's playing.
We did not need to sing it all, but we felt compelled to do so.
Yeah.
Doesn't that stand, as a testament to its quality?
Just as like a total tangent, it's so funny when I'm editing and we're singing like a mimic of what is being played, but it's also just being played at the same time.
You have to either try to line it up, or you either try to line it up,
or you just completely mute it.
Well, what Mackenzie will have to do is just sort of go along with it, and it'll be off key, and we're still singing along. But
to be honest, I don't usually try to line it up. That's too much work.
You've done that once or twice, which I appreciate, and sometimes it's by accident.
It's usually by accident.
That's funny, but anyways, I love Meta Ridley. I legitimately do listen to this song frequently just because it is. Yeah. Well, sorry. I should preface this. I'm either listening to this or I'm listening to a remix. But I have to shout out a certain remix artist later. But I'll get into that.
Okay, sure. I will say this is definitely my favorite boss fight theme. I like it more than I like the Metroid Prime fight. Actually, I did have a shout out that I wanted to give to another fight that I think we might have skipped over. Let's see. And it's Thardus, I believe. Thardus? Thardus? I don't know where this plays in game.
Thardus is from Doctor Who.
Oh.
Woo! So this is the Thardus fight. I really love it for many of the same reasons we talked about for the factory themes. It's got a very heavy synth, very deep, very resonant, and it's got a very beautiful piano on top of that. It's got a chaotic feeling, but still structured like a industrial fight should be. And the one screenshot that I saw of Thardus when I looked at this OST was he's a big rock guy. So I don't know, this seems like it fits a big rock guy fight. I think it works really well. I wanted to shout that out because the use of instrumentation in that fight in particular was really good, even for the soundtrack.
I love me a good industrial boss fight theme.
Don't you want? I was really hoping that when they got to Thardus, he's one of my favorite Metroid characters in general, so I was really hyped to see them go all out with his track, a fan favorite among everybody, I'm sure.
Honestly, I forget about this boss because he is tedious.
Just tedious and not fun and not hard.
Well, basically, this happens in Phendrana Drifts, and he's a space pirate experiment, and he is basically in this giant ice bowl kind of thing.
What?
And yeah, it kind of go, huh? But it's kind of like this. It's a bowl. It's a rounded edged circular bowl, and this guy rolls up into a ball and rolls at you. And you need to.
Oh, is he who gives you the morph ball boost?
Yep.
Is that what you? That's the most Metroid thing I've ever heard in my life.
So he rolls up in a ball and rolls at you, and you got to place bombs at the right times and underneath him and blow up his feet and then shoot him a whole bunch.
You're just timing a half fight basically. So
pretty much, yeah. And then you get boost ball, and then you can navigate through the other areas of Phendrana Drift and all that stuff. Okay. But I like the music. I can't even hear the song in my head.
I liked it going through the soundtrack. So for whatever that's worth, Thardus, if there's one fan of Thardus on the planet, then it's me. I will stand for my boy Thardus, dead as he might be.
Go for it, man. That's absolutely valid. Love that for you.
Well,
I'm gonna add that as my title going forward. I'm just gonna introduce myself as, hey everybody, welcome to Stage of the Sound. I'm Jack, Thardus' #1 fan, big stan of Thardus over here.
I'm a big Thardus guy.
Phendrana Drip was actually named after Thardus. Have you seen his Tims? Absolutely impeccable. We're moving on.
Did you say Phendrana Drip on purpose?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
It was a slip of the tongue on my part, and Jack is just running with Phendrana Drip.
Phendrana Drip.
Sam is coming out of Samus Aran coming out of Phendrana after going to the depths for the gravity suit with that Phendrana Drip.
You know she had to do it to him. Anyway, okay.
So I can see the pose with the arm cannon and everything right now.
I hate to be that guy, but we gotta kind of wrap up soon, hey?
We do gotta, yeah, well, this is gonna be probably a longer episode. I think it's okay to be longer, though. We got a guest star on here.
For sure.
Be fine.
Yeah, I know.
But we should get a move on. We can't stay here looking at Thardus's drip, just as much as I would love to.
Sad. Unfortunate.
Is there anything else about the soundtrack that you really wanted to touch on, Shane?
Have we gotten through it all at this point, do you think? Because Meta Ridley is very close to the end, right?
Yeah, Meta Ridley is very is literally what you fight before Metroid Prime, and then you descend and you go fight Metroid Prime. That's it.
And we talked about Metroid Prime early on.
Yep, at the start. We have a tendency to talk about the final boss at the very start of these episodes.
They're usually just so notable, is the thing.
Well, it's in this case it's notable, and also the themes from the start of the game are also the same themes at the end of the game. They call back to each other very, very well. Yeah. So, I mean, they coincide quite nicely anyways, so it works out in this case. But I will say, for like as we said before, as a listening point, the game is a lot of ambience. It's hard to find standout stuff, but I think it does its ambience really well.
What I'll say in that regard is that like there aren't a whole lot of games that I would say have standout ambient tracks, and this one does, which is like a big point in its favor, because that's a hard thing to accomplish. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the only other games that have standout ambient tracks to me are like JRPGs, like think Xenoblade.
I wouldn't even, but I like to call those ambient doesn't feel like it works, because stuff in like Xenoblade has very strong melodies, even in their area themes, right?
Actually,
like
sorry, I hate to interrupt. This segues perfectly into one of our kind of end episode segments that we do, which is called "If You Like This Soundtrack, What Should You Listen to?"
Well, I wanted to give a like full closing thoughts first, but
that's fine. But
early,
I mean, I just felt like the perfect time to talk about ambient soundtracks, man.
True. Yeah. Ambience, I don't know if Xenoblade is the exact right pick for this, but in terms of games that do work for this sort of ambience, I'm going to shout out Axiom Verge, again, from the first episode. I'm not a huge fan of Axiom Verge. It is a
Metroid spiritual successor.
Yes, like if you like Metroid music, and if you like, it has the more melodic stuff, but it also has the very much more ambient stuff. So if you want like a good mix of the sorts of styles you'll see in Metroid, Axiom Verge is the place to look. Obviously, if you don't get Metroid vibes looking at this game, then I don't know what to do for you.
Well, I'll jump in and kind of take ambient in a different direction, and I'm going to shout out the soundtracks for games that were composed by Austin Wintory, so like Journey and Abzu, which take like this ambient idea and move in not so alien a direction, but definitely a still really effective ambient one. I think that's a really
those tracks
example.
They're really good at like developing ambience,
for
like
sure.
ambience
Absolutely.
that
Abzu
moves
especially.
along with you.
Abzu especially, yeah.
Well, in those games, the storytelling is basically inputted into the audio of the game.
Yeah, it's a core part of the experience.
We got to do an Austin Wintory episode. I think I said that already.
Those games are art in the most truest form of
Abzu,
games that are art.
Genuinely, I'm not kidding. Abzu like influenced me as an artist. Like I think some of my musical language like comes from that game. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I would say very similarly to Mackenzie's take here of Abzu and Journey have very good stuff. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, so I will omit a recommendation for that, for similarity.
That's a very mature decision, Shane, but also cowardly, so be a little ashamed.
Listen, I don't like, the only thing that's relevant in my head is Subnautica Below Zero, but
honestly,
I don't think that's
I think
that's not a bad
frankly, take. I think that the Subnautica soundtrack, I haven't heard Below Zero, but even just base Subnautica, there's a lot of Metroid vibes there. It's a lot of ambience, but like it also has some very like alien but still enjoyable tunes for sure.
I would say
the ocean is very alien already, and on an alien world, the ocean is even more alien. So.
I guess it is applicable, but I don't know how memorable they are. Like sitting here,
I remember a couple tracks from Subnautica for sure that stick out in my brain right away.
And that's the other thing about ambient soundtracks is that they tend not to be so memorable, but that doesn't mean that they're not effective.
Yeah.
I would say it fit. The second game fit better than the first, even.
Below Zero did?
Yeah, Below Zero has better ambience than the first game.
Really?
I would say there's also more of it though, which I think is beneficial to it.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. Okay. Good recommendations, and getting a fuller picture of what we thought about the Metroid Prime soundtrack, like the ambience and stuff. What are our overall thoughts on this soundtrack, both in the context of the Metroid series and just as a standalone listening experience, and in the context of the game, Shane, where you can apply it?
Yeah, fair. I guess I'll go first here. In context of the game, I have a ton of nostalgia for this game and for its soundtrack, so I really, 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 really like this soundtrack and the game itself. So I'm probably biased in that regard. It's maybe not as good as I imagine it is, but like I will frequently go back and listen to, you know, Phendrana Drifts and Down Frigate Orpheon and like Space Pirates and Meta Ridley, because it's just steeped in nostalgia and it's just so good.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. What I'll say about the soundtrack, just listening to it, like I said before a little bit, almost every single track is, you can tell just by listening that it's in service of enhancing the game experience. Like, even the ambience that you don't immediately notice while you're listening to the soundtrack, it's all developing that feeling of isolation and tenseness or of serenity, you know? Whatever mood the game is going for, the music is always out there supporting it, which I think deserves mention. Like, it is phenomenal integration of music with the game, and that, you know, that's a core part of the video game music experience.
Yeah.
So I will definitely shout it up.
If a game soundtrack can do that effectively, then it's a good game soundtrack. That's what it's for, you know.
Yeah,
exactly. So no matter even though I can't listen to a lot of these tracks on their own or wouldn't want to, that is secondary. They don't need to appeal to me in my car in order to have done their job as a game soundtrack.
I guess what I'll say, given that I haven't really played the game at all and only know it very surface level, I tend to latch on to instrumentation and kind of how a track is arranged to kind of get a feel for it. And I think Metroid Prime is really really characteristic, you know, kind of mixing those like alien synth sounds with piano, harp, chorus. It really does a great job of evoking that kind of alien ambience.
Yeah.
It's really unique, but it works really well, I think.
It's still like ruined, but alien nonetheless. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. One last point I wanted to bring up is that I don't want to harp on it for too long, but just listening to this soundtrack really made me realize just how much Metroid Dread dropped the ball.
Oh, jeez.
This soundtrack, I complained in episode 0 we discussed Metroid Dread a little bit, and I said that the melodies aren't there, and Mackenzie, your response was like, well, maybe melody isn't what they need.
I'll say I played devil's advocate a little bit for that one, but after listening to Prime, I realized that they did drop the ball a little bit. They could have done it in a more interesting way, and they didn't.
Yeah.
I can't. I played all through Dread. I don't remember a single track. I can't think of a single song, not even in the tensest of moments, or when like the fight towards the end of the game where you fight what's the chosen name?
Ravenbeak. Yeah.
Ravenbeak. There's no epic song there that sticks in my memory. Like there absolutely should have been, but there just wasn't anything.
That is precisely what Jack and I said in episode 0.
It would have rounded out the sound, so it would have made that boss fight. It is already an all-time great in my mind, but it would have every aspect would have been perfect. It would have been incredible. So yeah, that's the way that I look at it.
Right.
But I don't want to end on such a downer. Metroid Prime, great example of
absolutely.
how to do a soundtrack like this. So.
I do want to give a shout out to one artist that I listen to still to this day. There's basically a guitarist who did a metal mix or metal mixes of a lot of the Metroid Prime songs, and they convert so well into metal tracks, and this dude just shreds.
Interesting.
It's an artist by the name of Stemmage. And if you are at all interested in any of this music, and you like metal at all, go listen to Metroid Metal by Stemmage, and they are just absolute jams. You will be headbanging your way into pain.
I probably won't be able to layer it into the audio here, but I'll definitely link it into the description for sure.
Please do.
I wouldn't have Metroid pinned as a sort of series that would lend itself well to metal at all, especially because it's like a lot of these ambient sounds and game fitting atmosphere. So I'm interested to see how that would turn out.
Honestly, I'll get you guys some links for that after this, and you guys can take a listen to it because it's absolutely worth listening to.
Yeah,
sounds good.
And if you're on YouTube, just check the description.
Check
it should be there, hopefully.
Right there. I will do my job, I promise.
All right, final end episode segment that we do is a fun little thing called "What Have You Been Playing or Listening To?" And I'm not going to start because I've done this twice in the past 2 days, and I need to think.
Shane, can you start us off? What have you been playing lately or listening to that you want to shout out?
Playing recently, I've been playing a bit of a game, a silly playing game called Project Wingman, in conjunction with Valheim, which is a sort of a Nordic survival crafting game. And then obviously layering that on with a bit of Dead Cells, but I don't think Dead Cells is quite exactly the the audio that everyone will listen to in terms of a musical track, but it is what it is. But Valheim actually has some cool music. It's good ambiance, and it's good it's good, like almost Celtic, like I think
Celtic?
there's some like Celtic.
I think it's Celtic.
I think Celtic is the basketball team.
Oh. There's some good instrumentation there, and there's some good like traditional instrumentation, which is cool to listen to. So
Oh, interesting. Okay. So if you want like a more classical folk type of feel, you'll go for Valheim?
yeah, Project Wingman just kind of hammers it into epic explosions playing game.
Fair enough. About what you'd expect.
Yeah.
I can jump off of this. I've been on my roguelite kick for a while, obviously. One of my favorite genres. I went through Risk of Rain and one other one recently. I don't remember what that first one was. Whoops. But the other one I want to shout out here is actually The Binding of Isaac. I think The Binding of Isaac Rebirth in particular, the Afterbirth DLC, or not Afterbirth, Repentance, I should specify. The Repentance DLC update added a lot of really phenomenal tracks, and I've heard some complaints that the Isaac OST is a little too atmospheric, and I can understand where you're coming from with that.
I don't like those complaints because it doesn't need to be not atmospheric, man.
I think I look at tracks like Gehenna that they added, and like there's no melody to that track at all, or if there is, it's like super discordant and a couple of notes at most, right?
Gehenna is great. I agree.
Yeah, and like it's just nailing this low, grumbling, intimidating presence that like it doesn't need to be more. When you go into big rooms, like an electric guitar will flare up, and like it gets as intense as it needs to be, while still really hammering home this low, terrible, I guess is the word that comes up in response to this sound. You know what I mean?
I also really like Downpour. Downpour is really good too.
Downpour is also very, very good. In general, I like the Rebirth OST overall, but Repentance specifically has added a whole bunch of great tracks, so I recommend it, in particular in context with the game.
So
yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I have a piece
on.
after you. I'll say this after you. You go first.
Oh, sure.
I have everything to say.
So I picked this up on the Steam Summer Sale a couple weeks ago, but I've been playing something called The Wandering Village, which is an indie game, kind of niche. It's not really my favorite. Like it's a resource gathering and resource management game, kind of like Civ, but it's like you're a village on this like walking mountain, essentially, like this big like monster.
Is it kind of like management, like how RimWorld is, that sort of style?
I'd say so, yeah. It's like you're founding a village, and then you like make a farm, you make houses, a doctor, and like it's
I think
cool.
I might have seen trailers for that game.
Yeah, it was on an indie showcase. I think that's how I figured out about it. It's like those kind of games aren't my favorite to play. I usually get kind of frustrated and like I don't really know how to deal with problems when they come up. To me, it felt like Oxygen Not Included. Kind of a similar vibe.
It's very similar, yeah.
Yeah. Musically, though, I think it's really cool. It includes a lot of kind of like typically like kind of tribal elements, so a lot of like vocalizations and ambient sounds. I think it's great. I think the music does a really good job of evoking it. It's like it almost has a Studio Ghibli kind of visual energy, not musically.
Okay.
Do you know Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind?
Yeah.
Very
great
similar vibe. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I've been into. Yeah.
Cool.
Neat.
Once I forgot to shout out specific thing. Another game I played it I guess 2 weeks ago now already, but Hi-Fi Rush.
Oh.
My goodness. It is about the most applicable game you can get to a music podcast because music is the center point. But Hi-Fi Rush is phenomenal. The music is jamming. It's for those who don't know, it's a rhythm-based beat-em-up game, very similar to like Bayonetta or
Devil May Cry sort of style,
DMC sort of style. It is very, very, very good. Highly recommend. And also has a great soundtrack. Both the copyrighted versions of the songs and they made like an entirely secondary soundtrack for streamers to play it. Both sets are both very good to listen to and highly recommend if you're interested in sort of a more rock kind of funk music style with good beat to it. So
interesting, yeah, because like I've said before, Crypt is maybe my favorite game soundtrack, and Crypt in general, Crypt of the Necrodancer is one of my favorite games, period. So like the fact that I didn't pick this up right away, I feel a little ashamed about. Like Hi-Fi Rush should be exactly what's up my alley.
The game is like $40, and it's, you know, how long did it take me to play this game? It took me, it's only about a 10-hour game, but you can play through it twice because there's stuff you can't get from the beginning. Okay, so it's a 20-hour game.
And the soundtrack is great?
And the soundtrack is great.
There we go. What more do you need?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're just about done here. It's been a pleasure having you on, Shay.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you letting me come on.
It's been great. We'll have you back on as soon as Metroid Prime 4 comes out.
Potentially sooner. We'll see how it goes. If we ever need a guide for a game that neither of us have played, you'll be one of the people.
Yeah, this has been great. I think this is the first episode where I just fully hadn't engaged with the game at all. It was cool to hear everyone's kind of takes on it. It was great.
It's the first one that I hadn't played for sure. So yeah, it was a neat experience, and I think it went pretty well.
Thank you everyone for watching. You can find us at Stages of Sound anywhere you get your podcasts. Spotify,
and a couple places you can't.
Well, that's not true. Unless you have access to our Google Drive, but please don't do that.
Well, then they'd be getting their podcasts from there, so even that wouldn't apply. Anyway.
We're also on YouTube, so subscribe, and also share with your friends who like video game music. That's a thing you should do as well.
Yeah, if you got a friend who is still painting that house, it's taken so long for them to paint that house.
I forgot about that bit, Jack. Why are you bringing that back up? It's not going to make sense unless they watch the last episode. Dear.
No, I feel like everybody can relate to this friend that's painting a house.
If you don't understand the bit that Jack is making right now, you need to go watch the last episode too. That's nightmare.
I guess you're just gonna have to. Oh darn. All right. That's that for us. Audience, exit soundstage right. Shane, if you didn't know, that's our set intro that we have at the end of every episode.
That was about to be the perfect outro, man.
And it was. All you have to do is cut it right there.
Why would I do that?